Hey everybody, welcome to the Man Talk Podcast. This is Jacob and Julian here, and today we're talking about the different excuses that people, and ourselves included by the way, do, and we're going to try and see if we can find some root cause and find some better systems to be able to overcome these excuses. So, Julian, what do you got for us for common excuses that you tell yourself?
Yeah, so in my life, at least historically, if I don't feel like doing something, usually my go-to excuse is I'm busy or something's come up, which isn't necessarily true a lot of the time. Usually I'm just lying to try to get out of showing up or doing something. This is more in reflection of my high school self, where I would just try to get out of things like, oh, I don't want to hang out with this friend because I'm tired, and rather than just say I'm tired, I'd rather just lie because it was more convenient. Over time, I learned that one, obviously, my friends didn't appreciate that because it's like, hey, why are you just ditching and bailing us? Because before today, you told me you were going to show up. But now you're saying, oh, I can't make it, and it's always within the last hour right before, sort of thing. Something's come up. And to that, I would usually just respond, like, you'll get over it. It's not a big deal. But in subsequent years, when I trained myself not to do that and just try to be better about sticking to my word, it became pretty clear that that was a lot easier to manage all the different like deceptions and lies in my head to just being honest and saying, yeah, today I don't feel like it. It's kind of an off day. Hopefully you don't take it too like near and dear in terms of the response. The main reasoning for the change, at least from my perspective, was that it didn't make me feel any better just to lie to people all the time. And over time, I learned that lying just made things worse. And then friends aren't stupid, right? They can tell like you're just making something up.
Especially when you give them a pattern of behavior.
Yeah, and yeah, with a conscientious effort, I rectified that by just telling them the truth. And as difficult as that was, over time it became pretty easy because I just integrated it with myself and my current year disposition. But definitely in high school it was really bad. How about in your experience? You probably never were that extreme.
Me, no. The loyalty was there, so it wasn't about. It was more about letting friends down. I didn't want that to happen, but I'd still do the common ones. I'm tired today. I don't feel like doing this. I'm hangry. Those ones would usually show up on my radar, mainly because hangry. I mean, come on. I mean, people do get hungry. They do get mad when they're not getting food, but that's no excuse to treat somebody anyway. I mean, it's not like it's written in the HR code book at work. Hey, you can treat everyone with respect until you're hungry. It's just continue to treat people with respect in a professional manner. Right. And with friends, same thing. I mean, look, don't give yourself these excuses in a friend group either. But nonetheless, I find myself having these excuses from time to time, and I've wanted to put more of them out, mainly because there's not really a place for them. I mean, life would be a lot better if I didn't have these excuses from time to time. Now, I've been able to smash some of the other ones you were talking about, which is the loyalty thing. It's not about if I'm going to be somewhere, I'll be somewhere. But if I've got a really good reason and it's thought out, I'll say, hey, I can't make it. But I try and think of that ahead of time, and that helps. So project where you're going to be in a day or two if you've got plans in a day or two, and then figure out if you can make a yes or no, as opposed to making the yes decision without thinking about it and then running yourself into the ground 2 days later when you realize that there was no place for it in the schedule. So there are some systems we can do, which we're going to talk about later in the podcast. But yeah, I'm tired, hangry. It's my Friday. A lot of those things can pop up from time to time, especially when you get frustrated with things at work or things going into the personal life stuff. So
Yeah, I actually have a good example of when being too agreeable causes more problems than fixes problems in terms of excuses, because you don't want to lie, right? And you don't want to let your friends down. So what you do, you just agree to everyone. So this happened with my ex-girlfriend. Actually, she on 4th of July she made plans with 4 different friend groups to hang out at the same time, and she just didn't have the tools to tell any one of them no, to the point where like she broke down actually to me. It was like, oh no, I'm overwhelmed. I don't know how to, you know, tell one of these people no, and I just told them yes, right?
Yeah.
So then I thought about it with her for a second. It was like, oh, why don't we all just hang out together at the same time? We're all going to the same place. Then she like looked up and was like, oh, well, yeah, we can do that. We all know each other, the 4 different friend groups. And then at the end of the day, we all went and hung out and made it work out. So there wasn't any need to excuse anything. You just work with the situation you pigeonholed yourself in and make it work out, rather than letting people down, you know? I don't know if you've been in that situation before, but...
Yeah, a few times. I try and avoid that, though. I mean, if you can't make it, you can't make it. Have a good reason for it, and make a case.
Yeah.
And for their time, too, so that way they're not wasting it. I have been at where you're supposed to be in 2 places at the same time. Now, that's different, because then, okay, you can't just work with what you've got. Someone's going to take the short end of the stick. So, in that case, it's a little harder to justify. But if you're all going to the same place, I mean, that's a different story.
Yeah, I mean, that example just ties together putting yourself in a situation that didn't need to occur because you forgot, or you were being too agreeable, or you lacked the, I guess, let's say conscientiousness to plan ahead. And with a lot of these things, especially as you get older, you get a lot better at managing your schedule and not needing to make excuses. Literally just planning, right? And when we go into the systems aspect of how to mitigate excuses, we can elaborate on that. But in terms of just more general excuses that we like to tell ourselves, oh, I can't work out today, I'm too tired. Oh, I can't work on this assignment because XYZ reason, when probably it's just you didn't budget your time properly. Oh, I don't have any money to go out, and again, I didn't budget properly. So these are all just, little nicks on the shield, so to speak. But if enough of them make their way and start like forming a giant crack, you got yourself a big problem, right? Because now you're essentially like, oh, you're unreliable. Your words don't mean anything.
And that's what I was getting at in the earlier part of the podcast with, well, I didn't want to let my friends down, and I also don't want this to become a bigger issue than it is.
Yeah.
Because that is true. Enough of these things, if you line them up, they may combine into something that actually puts a crack in the shield, as you were talking about. And that sucks, because then now that's actually impacting your life versus just something petty that you can put off and it's not a big deal. So now that's something that's on my radar, and it's kind of alarming to have that so close to home. So I'd like to do something about it.
Yeah. Why do you think that this is a pervasive thing to begin with? Like lies that we deceive ourselves with?
Oh, it just keeps going. I mean, Jason McCarthy said quitting is forever. We were talking about that on podcast 29. And I really like that line because there's something about quitting that makes it a habit. So if you make a habit of saying the wrong thing to a friend, or the wrong excuse, wrong reasons, all these things can turn into habits where it's really hard to get out of, especially if you don't know any other methods. So then you just stick with the devil you know. And that's not exactly helpful, other than just maintaining a habit. And I think we can do better than that, people to personnel to personnel. And I'm interested in doing that. So the insidious part of it is really when they combine and they really start doing damage to your life. But I think it's not even just about your life, but everyone else's life too. If somebody else can get away with it, that encourages other people to do the same thing. by your standard of what's considered okay.
Right.
And now it's impacting other people's lives, and I think that's just not okay. I mean, God forbid, if I've got habits that are affecting someone else negatively, that may have a ripple effect that's going to influence not just me and him or that friend, but just his friend, the friends of friends. It ripples.
Right. Believe it or not, things you do, things you say have an effect on other people and yourself. So if you're just wishy-washy or flaky, right, you build up that reputation with your friends and with yourself not to be held to account, not to be reliable. And especially if your friends really care about you, they're like, oh man, XYZ didn't show up again. What's his problem? You know? It's like he always does this at the last minute, he bails. And when it becomes that habit, right, it starts to atrophy your relationships, really. They just get anemic, and then at some point, if they're sick and tired of it, your friends just stop contacting you because they know that you're not going to show up. And that'd be the worst case scenario, you know?
And the best case scenario is they actually give you some patience, but you know that they're going to be talking about it with the other friends, because that's a topic of discussion. Here's a problem in our friend group that's not getting resolved, and now it's wasting their time just over one person that is refusing to be accountable to them. And being accountable isn't just about, oh, I need to be responsible for everything I do. It's more about people can rely on you when we say, can you meet up in whatever place that we've decided to go to? Can we rely on you to do something simple, complicated? That all those things need to be a yes or no answer versus, well, we don't know. And then if they don't know, well, then if something is actually needed for a particular event and it doesn't happen, that has consequences.
Right. Yeah, and then also, more likely than not, the reasons why an excuse would pop up in the first place is, the fear, right, of saying no, or fear of the consequences of showing up, and how you might feel in that moment not bringing your A game. And then in tandem with the fear, you just might not, be able to confront yourself when it gets comes to the forefront. Like, yeah, I don't actually want to be here around you guys, right? Imagine having that conversation with your friends in that moment. They might take it personally when it's more of just, no, I feel like crap today. I need a day off. Which you could just tell them and it would be understandable.
Just tell them. And any friend who understands it, look, if you look at their life and they've got justification for taking a day to get back to it and then come on back when they're ready, I think a lot of friends can appreciate that. And you and me are both introverts. We understand that at some point you need to let us go be by ourselves for a little bit to recharge. And we just can't be around people 24/7 with no consequences. Eventually we need to go and say, this was fun, I had a great time, but I need to go and recharge. But when I come back, I'll be happy to rejoin you. Something like that, so there's an honest expectation that you're setting for yourself and for them. I just need a break for a moment, so that way when I come back, I'm not angry at you because I'm not getting enough energy. Now I'm coming back because I actually want to take care of my friends and be with them and make them better and all that. So they seem trivial, but together they're not. And I like the word you said, insidious, because it's not that it's evil, it's just that it's undermining something good, which is more of what insidious means.
Right. Do you have other examples of lies and excuses we tell ourselves that maybe aren't so common in people's perception of, oh, this is actually pretty bad or insidious to do, but do it almost subconsciously because it kind of becomes a habit?
So the habits are usually with making time for the friends that you think that'd be so easy, right? Oh, these are people that I actually want to hang out with. And then they say, oh man, sorry I slept through it, or I had something else come up. And that shows a lack of care and consideration for the people that you had an expectation with.
Yeah, it's pretty self-centered, self-serving.
Yeah, and I'd say that's less common than your typical, oh, I can't go to the gym today because I'm tired. And granted, there's going to be that maybe 1 out of 7 days where that's probably true, but we're talking in some spectrum of generalities. So if you use that more than once a week, okay,
There
it's
might be something deeper going on.
probably, I would imagine so. And if you continue to do that with other habits in your life, it slowly undermines the foundation that you've been trying to build as far as who you are as a persona, a human being, a friend, a coworker, and I don't want that ruined. And that's why we're actually doing this, so that way other people might have a shot at trying to be more aware about what kind of uncommon and common excuses we tell ourselves are.
Yeah, and a good starting point for everybody is just watch how you talk. Watch what you actually say. So if you happen to have a mind that's races a lot and has is running a million miles per second, a good tactic to try to like mitigate those racing thoughts is just slow yourself down and focus on one thing at a time. Otherwise, all that pent up anxiety, frustration, um, even pessimistic thinking can really like impair your judgment and your ability to just like function as a considerate human being to your friends or just to yourself.
Yeah.
So some techniques to slow your thoughts down is go exercise. It really like cleans out any pent up frustration you might have physically with your whole body, because your mind's part of your body, right? And if you're not moving, if you're not exercising, you're not trying to exhaust your energy, so to speak, then the logical place that energy is going to express itself is in your internal dialogue, in your internal thoughts. And that's tough, especially if you've been in a situation where you're overwhelmed and you're just trying to like clear your mind, but your mind is just not having it, right? If you go on a run or if you do some strenuous exercise, it's a good way to like really really take the bite out of your inner thoughts.
Yeah, and with that considered, it's more about the blood flow that you've actually been pumping into your brain. So now you
Correct, yeah.
actually can get your thoughts organized because there's blood flow. I mean, Daniel Amen, we've talked about this doctor before. He keeps talking about what Julian's talking about, which is exercise allows for good blood flow in the brain, and there are plenty of other tactics to do that. Um, but by not doing that, you're not allowing a key factor in your brain, the parietal lobe, you know, mechanical movement. That's its whole job. So you're allowing for your brain to not get its full capacity for that. And some people think, well, it's a waste of time, or it's going to be a time sucker. I don't have time for it. Find a way to get something in, because a wise man once said, "Some workout is better than no workout." And the main reason for that is so you can get some blood flow and think straight. And you can't really put a price on that because no one else is going to do it for you. And that's another good message for what we're trying to do with this podcast today is no one's going to take care of your brain or your excuses for you. Find a way to see if you can do it yourself, and see if you can get people that are somewhat like-minded to help out with the right and proper thinking.
Yeah, with any rectifying behavior that you're trying to implement that's different than your standard operating procedure, in this case, like, oh, I never exercise, so how do I start exercising? You really need to budget out your time and integrate it into your day to day life, or at least week to week life, because you need at least 30 minutes of strenuous exercise every 3 days, so an hour and a half a week at minimum. And that's just to make sure everything's working properly. And if you're not getting that at the moment, then you have to reprioritize certain things in your life such that that becomes more of a habit. And obviously, you're not going to go from 0 to 60 overnight. You have to step your way through it and just have an um, initial baseline. Really, it's like, oh, can I go on a walk today? How about tomorrow? Can I do a walk or even maybe a slight brisk jog? And then with that, you're always trying to improve yourself to the point where you get to the rhythm, into the habit of, okay, now I'm actually exercising when I say I'm going to exercise. I'm not just telling that to myself so that I feel better. when I have the thought, but then feel awful when I don't actually commit to it. It's really a commitment issue at that point. It's like, how do I set up a system where I can commit and get what I need to do and what I say I need to do done? Do you have any techniques for how to actually hold yourself to account so that you do what you say you do?
I'm glad you asked. So there's a lot of things that are within our control, but I would say if you want to really up the ante, get some people that want to do the same thing. And it would be really handy so that way when you're trying to exercise, it's not just all you, lone survivor trying to face the world, which a lot of people, they take that message away from podcasts like this and they go, okay, it's all my responsibility for everything. Well,
that's overwhelming.
It is. And you know what? Because there is a lot of truth to it. There's a lot of truth to it, which is overwhelming. So you got to find other people that would share that vision and then put it into practice with other people. And Julie and I are doing this together with the podcast today. I mean, we didn't decide to just do it all on our own. We actually both decided to commit to a project. And then that's encouraged accountability and striving towards a continuous goal together. So see if you can find people like that, even if they're not in your work-related group. If you need an exercise group, see if you can find people that are around that they may be from totally different backgrounds, but if they want to get a walk in, heck, there's all kinds of people walking at 7 o'clock in the morning. Find a way to get that in. So that way, when you do face overwhelming responsibility for trying to take ownership of your life, you do have other people that are doing the same thing, and it raises your expectations and forces you to maintain those habits, not all on your own strength. And I think humans are more wired for, you've got some kind of accountability if you didn't do your run or you didn't do something that is a habitual gain for you and or somebody else. We're used to some kind of discipline from other people.
Yeah, if you're the only person who's holding you to account and you don't particularly care whether or not you let yourself down, you can get into a situation where you just get complacent, right? Where you don't necessarily have your best interests in mind and you just self-validate based off of existing. And that stuff's kind of, easy, pretty baseline, right? You just fall into a pattern and then you're just content with how you are in that moment. When in reality, humans are social creatures. We want to not let other people down. So actually having that group of people pushing each other, encouraging each other to be better every day, whether it be through exercise or just holding them to their word, is a very powerful mechanism to make sure that you actually do as you say, and you plan out your life accordingly.
So don't feel like it's all by yourself on this, but do take personal responsibility in a way that could feel burdensome. I mean, that's actually something Jordan Peterson brings up a lot, is that, actually carry enough weight so that way you feel that you can almost not carry it, but then you'll get stronger from it.
Right. And then here's a good example for our podcast, right? So for the longest time, we were on a hiatus because internet connections dropped because of the whole pandemic going on and streaming quality just tanking. So for like a good month or two, we were like, oh, we can't get the podcast going because of this problem. And then at the end of the day, we both thought it through. It was like, hey, why don't we just show up at the person's house that has the better internet? Hence why I'm visiting Jacob in his humble abode, and just film the podcast on a time that we can meet. And then after working out some logistical, not problems, but working out some logistics, we got to work. And now we're back on a normal schedule like we were when we were doing it purely remotely. So we were able to work through a solution that seemed to have all the excuses in the world all boxed up in a tiny bow,
And now we're actually doing it again, which is fantastic. I mean, now we had 5 podcasts planned, and then it's just sitting there, and now we can actually knock them out one by one. So it's been good to do this again.
Yeah. So a way of mitigating excuses is just developing a good out of the box thinking mode, where it's like, okay, what exactly is prompting this current excuse? Oh, the internet's bad. Okay, well, in lieu of good internet in this situation, why not just make it physical? physical encounter. So that didn't initially click in our minds because it's like, oh, we've only done this virtually. How would we do it in person? But then we worked through the logistics of it. It was like, okay, it's pretty easy actually.
Well, the good news is we tried this earlier on podcast 16, but we were wondering, are we going to have a weekend that we'll both be able to do it? Because sometimes I got to work on weekends. Sometimes Julian's got to go on a trip. So that's probably why it didn't come so intuitively. I don't know if we're going to be able to do this. But once we actually were able to allocate time, we brought it up and we said, I wonder if this could be a thing. And it's been very helpful. And actually, because of that, we were able to find other things with the podcast that we can optimize because we're in the same room. It's a little harder when you got the screen in front of you. So this time, it's been great for the podcast to grow a little more in terms of what we want to do with it.
Yeah, it's been just with those little tweaks in our modes of thought in our what's possible, what can we do, is pretty useful just to exercise our problem solving abilities, right? Just to have that ability of, okay, well, here's our problem, what is an actual solution, rather than, oh, woe is me, we can't do anything. So, Jacob, what's your thoughts on systems?
Systems, huh?
Yeah.
Systems for me are going to be the habitual things that we do so we can actually get somewhere instead of just running around in circles.
Yeah.
So these are going to be the habits that are going to get us towards a goal versus just setting it. So this is, again, another Scott Adams thing that we've talked about from time to time.
Yeah.
And I'm looking forward to bringing it up again because it has some utility.
Yeah. So what systems do you implement in your day-to-day life to hold you more accountable to prevent yourself from making excuses or not show up to things?
So again, we're creatures of habit, so find habits that you're going to do consistently. So for me, I check my phone. I say, you know what, I'm not going to check like every 5 minutes, but I'll check. If I don't hear it, I'll check every so often. So for me, maybe 1 to 2 hours, I'll check it. But if I hear it ring, I can have an if-then statement of how I'm going to respond, right? But that's just kind of the world we live in now. So communication with people, so that way they don't feel like they're being left out or they're not being heard. Other systems that I've got are making sure that when I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it, but I do it with a presupposition that I've already checked my calendar. So I've got a calendar, I set up things on when I'm going to be busy, and then I can fill in where I need to go from there. Seems pretty basic. These aren't really...
reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, this isn't even I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, but they are things that I do, so I don't overbook. And I really get into trouble when life starts getting faster. I don't know if you've got something similar in your life when life starts feeling faster,
Yep.
and I'm not doing the quality control of verifying I've got the time. That's when I find myself where the system needs to be in there the most, because I'm relying on the system so that way I'm not actively always paying attention to it.
Yeah.
So that's the main idea behind those systems.
Yeah, so what I would add to that, just for clarification's sake, when we're talking about systems, we're talking about a general structure in order to facilitate what you need to have happen. So in this case, what's the structure that you're going to use to hold you to account to not, lie or deceive other people or just not show up and do the thing that you're supposed to do? In my case, for my systems, in addition to using a calendar, in addition to just managing my time better, is taking care of, I guess, the less intuitive things. Like, oh, okay, did I get enough sleep the night before? Did I eat the proper meals at the correct time so there's no conflict? Like, oh, I'm hungry now that I'm out with my friends. I need to eat. I'm starving and I feel miserable. Do I actually want to hang out with these people, right? Having that self-assessment is like, oh, am I guilt-tripped to hang out with them, or do I actually want to hang out with them? Which may be a little bit of a strange idea to have, but you may have to consider that, oh, am I genuinely interested in being with these people, or do I feel obligated? And that's kind of a more deeper conversation you have to have with yourself. Is like, are these actually friends I want to be with? Which might get a little deeper than, oh, I don't really feel like it, right? Because then that's more of a self-reflective tool, which is best used through some kind of journaling or self-assessment method, which is another system you can use. So for self-assessment or self-reflection, you really have to essentially ask yourself a list of questions, and you don't have to generate these questions on your own. There's actually a lot of online resources for you to prioritize. Oh, this is what a quality friend looks like. Do they hit me up from time to time? Do they always, are they usually there for me when I need them most? Do they flake a lot? Do they do do they bring joy into my life? If for whatever reason one of those things are a deal breaker for you, then you might be telling yourself, I don't know if I should hang out with this person, because you know that that person's not the greatest influence on you. And it could be this subconscious thing of, oh, I don't need to hang out with them because I actually don't want to be around them to begin with. But I'm not quite there yet in my mindset to just say that. So when you have that a system of self-assessment in place where you can just appropriately tell yourself honestly, like, hey, do I want to be friends with these people? Like, really? And if you start hedging yourself on, oh, yeah, I don't know. There might be some more like modes or avenues you have to work through where, like, I do this sometimes with friends that I'm hanging out with, where I'm just checking in with myself, like, hey, am I actually enjoying my time right now? Which is kind of a strange thought to have when you're hanging out with a friend, right? Because the idea is they're your friends because you do enjoy their company. But, over time, people can change, situations change, and just because you grew up with them at 6 years old doesn't mean your relationship is still 6 years old.
And I'm really glad you brought that up, because these are uncommon ways to think about friendships as they develop. And if you don't maintain that, this is the cultivation aspect of the friendship. You may find your friendships going into a different avenue than you would have originally expected, because there's this presupposition that people just have. Oh, I've been friends with them for X amount of years, or, oh, you always enjoy hanging out with them, right? And there's this social pressure to maintain these obligations, that's the correct term, obligation, which kind of sounds strange, because when you think of friendships, you think, well, it's an obligation that I'm voluntarily enjoying too. So it's not the same kind of obligation, the type of context you mentioned.
Yeah, but some friends, as everyone probably has a friend where they feel obligated to hang out with them, but you don't actually enjoy your time with them. And with those friendships, you really have to nail down what your purpose is with, giving off the illusion that you are their friend. What do you actually get out of it? What's your intent, I guess, with that friendship? If you can't really answer that question to yourself, either out of fear or just out of a lack of self-awareness with your understanding of, oh, I'm friends with them because I've always been friends with them. Yeah, I mean, that's a good enough reason, but you should cultivate your friendships, as Jacob mentioned, so that you maximize your potential, output, I guess, for lack of a better term.
And it's a capacity. So
yeah,
the capacity to be able to not only bear with them, but be able to help. And when you already think of these things, this is very proactive. So instead of, I've always been friends with them,
reacting to,
which is reacting,
yeah,
and it's not intentional. Make it intentional. And that's actually why we brought up Jay Shetty on the last podcast, because this guy is all about intentions. Good, planned, thoughtful behaviors, which is a lot of what we're getting at here for battling excuses, is to make sure you put it on the board. Why am I here? What good am I doing to my friends when I'm around? Am I finding joy in it too? because it's not fair if you're not getting any joy either. In a true friendship, there's a give and take. And then in a coworker situation or wherever you may find yourself socially, you want to assess that too, to differing degrees, because in work you are getting paid to be there.
Right.
And then socially, you may have a little more freedom to find yourself getting yourself into another social group, because it's a little more fluid than like a work environment.
But that brings up a good point about negotiating how close you are with your coworkers. Like, do you want your coworkers to be your friends? What does that entail? What if something goes wrong at work and you intertwined yourself in this obligation of, I want to be their friend, but I also have a duty at work to, provide the best output for the quality of work that I'm trying to provide. And then that gets into kind of a gray area of, do you keep your coworkers at arm's length just because they're your coworkers, or do you want to actually cultivate a strong work environment? And in terms of like tying it together with excuses, right? Your excuses for not, rising up the ranks at your job could just very well be, I don't want to socialize with my coworkers because I don't feel that invested in getting to know them at that level. But that's just a perceptual tweak that you'd have to make. It's like, wait a minute, so yes, you don't want to be Machiavelli and just manipulate your coworkers so you can rise the ranks, right? That'd be pretty evil. Instead, you'd hang out with your coworkers at work and make the most of the work situation, not necessarily take that outside of work, and I guess in a sense compartmentalize the meaning of that work relationship versus trying to confuse it necessarily with a work friendship. What do you think about that?
I dig it, because when you put them in the right frame, now that relationship makes sense. Cool, this has a utility for both parties. It's making them better, it's making me better. I don't feel resentment over it, and they understand the boundaries of what that's going to be. So in the context of getting rid of excuses, if it's planned out properly, that already eliminates a fair amount of potential excuses that can come up of, I don't want to hang out with them, or I don't feel an obligation to them. But if you already defined it as you go and made it on purpose, now we're actually moving in a proper direction. And I really dig it, because now half of the decision was already made before the phone call or the text message showed up. And now it's not as big of a concern because the decision was thought about. There was some kind of planning involved.
Yeah, it's very important when you're thinking about your own excuses. What are the boundary conditions? What are the frame of mind that these excuses are working in, right? If you can establish those with some, self-reflective thought, then you can really drill down into why those things are coming out of your mouth to begin with. I don't feel the need to hang out with my coworkers outside of work. Okay, great. So you set your boundary condition, work is work. So within that condition, I'm going to maximize my work relationships and get the most out of it. And reciprocally, you would hope that your coworker respects that boundary condition, and then that excuses won't need to come out of that.
And now it's not so much about excuses as it is much about prioritization. And then people understand where you're coming from, you're telling the truth, and you can have respect. And everyone wants respect with one another, usually. So all those things need to be considered when we're talking about breaking these excuses down. There's a couple of podcasts we actually did that explain a lot of this. When we were talking about Rule 8 in Jordan Peterson's book, we broke down some other concepts of truth and how it affects your life. And in in the podcast 24, we were talking about what happens when you don't take care of yourself biologically. So all these things could be for further reference if you guys wanted to see that. But as far as this podcast goes, I'm really glad we had the time to be able to put in the work for dealing with excuses. I want to use this for motivation for myself too, to make sure that I stay in check, because we're all human. We all need to have some kind of improvement. Otherwise, we have a tendency to just kind of fall away from it.
And just shift the goalpost on your expectations. Like, yeah, you can update your expectations, like with your 1, 2, 3, 5-year plan. But if you constantly keep shifting where your outcome's going to be, then that lack of commitment kind of, anchors you in place, and you're kind of pedaling towards nowhere. So the ultimate goal is just to try to, think through your actions, think through the way you speak, such that the outcome that you're striving towards is intentional, has a purpose, is within boundary conditions that are comfortable for you. Because otherwise, you're just kind of wandering around aimlessly, speaking carelessly, and not happy at the end of the day. And all those are pretty awful moods to be in.
So take the alternative to find a way to overcome your excuses too. We'll be joining there right with you over the next few weeks here, because some of these things might come up again in future podcasts. Just like what happened with podcast 24 and podcast 4, I believe. So it's been great talking to you, Julian. Was there anything else you wanted to bring up?
No, that's about it. Just keep in mind some of the ideas we shared today, and then hopefully can give you the tools to be a little bit more mindful in how you speak and how you act.
Very good. Everybody, thanks again for watching. We'll be posting some more over the next few weeks. So as always, enjoy the content, see what you want. We'll put some timestamps below in the description. As always, have a good one.
Thanks, everyone.